Вот уже несколько месяцев.
For several months now, the whole world has been watching as the United States continues to deliberately escalate tensions around friendly Venezuela under the pretext of combating drug smuggling and terrorist threats, while illegally destroying civilian vessels in the Caribbean Sea. At the previous meeting of the Council, we all had the opportunity to see that behind this artificial screen lies the task of building up the American military presence and putting pressure on an independent state whose policies do not suit Washington. It seems that the White House has decided to dust off the well-worn practice of using the need to combat terrorism as a justification for overt aggression and interference in the affairs of sovereign states. This time, the legitimate government of the Bolivarian Republic has been declared a so-called foreign terrorist organization. They are trying to impose a flawed logic on everyone that a single decision by the American authorities is enough to turn a sovereign state into a criminal enterprise against which any use of force can now be called law enforcement operation and the protection of national interests. We see no point in delving into the absurdity of American pseudo-legal tricks, as they are so untenable and do not even remotely comply with international law. The U.S. President's statement of December 16th needs no further interpretation. It is a direct claim to the natural resources and subsoil of another state and an open, if not brazen, exertion of military, political, and economic pressure with the aim of changing an undesirable regime. The United States is already backing up its intentions with acts of outright piracy aimed at seizing sovereign natural resources, as we have all seen in recent days. We strongly condemn the seizure of oil tankers by the U.S. military and the de facto imposition of a naval blockade on Venezuela. The actions of the United States violate all key norms of international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Security Council resolutions, and the Charter of the United Nations itself. Colleagues, the blockade of the Venezuelan coast illegally imposed by the United States is a genuine act of aggression. Unfortunately, there is every reason to believe that the U.S. is not acting against Venezuela on a one-off basis. This unfolding intervention could become a template for future military action against Latin American states in accordance with the so-called Trump Amendment to the Monroe Doctrine, enshrined in the recently published U.S. National Security Strategy. This is a misguided signal to all countries in the region that seek to pursue a sovereign course and independently determine their economic, political, and cultural systems. Washington is prepared to respect your independence and take your interests into account only if you are willing to align yourself with U.S. interests and pursue a course that is beneficial to them. So don't ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. We reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people in the face of the trials they are undergoing. We support the Maduro government's course of action aimed at protecting the national interests and sovereignty of their homeland. Their homeland. We regret that the new American administration, which has shown sobriety and pragmatism in a number of other crisis situations, remains hostage to approaches that itself actively criticizes. In the case of Venezuela, we hope that common sense will prevail and that Washington will be able to stop in time and avoid a fatal mistake that will inevitably undermine long-term American national interests.
Since then, the United States has continuously escalated its military deployment in Caribbean waters near Venezuela under the pretext of combating drug trafficking. It has intensified sanctions, blockades, and military threats against Venezuela, claiming to have sunk a U.S.-flagged vessel, killed its crew, and seized a cruise ship. The U.S. government has designated the Venezuelan government as a foreign terrorist organization, declared Venezuelan territory, oil, and assets to be U.S. property, and even threatened military strikes against Venezuela itself. This series of U.S. actions and statements has persistently heightened regional tensions, provoking grave concern among regional nations and the international community. He called on all parties to de-escalate tensions and safeguard regional stability, and expressed willingness to play a mediating role in this regard. China attaches importance to President Maduro's recent open letter. As an independent sovereign state, Venezuela has the right to autonomously develop mutually beneficial cooperation with other nations and to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. The international community should respect and support China's opposition to all unilateral bullying practices and uphold the sovereignty and national dignity of all countries. We oppose the use or threat of force in international relations. We oppose external forces interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs under any pretext. We oppose illegal unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction lacking legal basis under international law and unauthorized by the Security Council. We call upon the U.S. to heed the just demands of the international community, immediately cease relevant actions, and avoid further escalation of tensions. We urge the U.S. to uphold the interests of regional countries.
Let me begin by stating and reiterating the United States does not recognize Nicolas Maduro or his cronies as the legitimate government of Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is a fugitive from American justice and the head of the foreign terrorist organization Cartel de los Soles. In fact, Maduro and his regime stole the election, and the international community has the receipts. President Trump has been very clear that he is going to use the full power of the United States of America, the full might of the United States, to take on and eradicate these drug cartels which have operated with impunity in our hemisphere for far too long, and everyone knows it. These cartels are not like the mafia. These cartels are sophisticated, very technically capable, well-financed, and are wreaking havoc in our region. In its own 2025 World Drug Report, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as the key trafficking route in the entire Western Hemisphere for illegal drugs and for illegal narcotics and materials entering the United States and increasingly Europe. The United States will impose and enforce sanctions to the maximum extent to deprive Maduro of the resources he uses to fund Cartel de los Soles, which the United States has designated as a foreign terrorist organization along with Tren de Aragua. Important to this council meeting today, this includes profits from the sale of oil used to finance these cartels. The reality of the situation is that sanctioned oil tankers operate as the primary economic lifeline for Maduro and his illegitimate regime. The sanctioned tankers also fund the narco-terrorist group Cartel de los Soles. Maduro is responsible for trafficking, using these resources and using these profits into both the United States and Europe. And one has to ask, why have sanctions, either bilaterally, unilaterally, or backed by the international community, if they're not enforced? Well, the United States under President Trump is enforcing them in international waters. Otherwise, they are just empty words. The people of Venezuela, frankly, deserve better. These people who have suffered under Maduro's socialist dictatorship. It is the action and policies of the illegitimate Maduro regime that pose an extraordinary threat to our hemisphere's peace and stability, and to that of the United States.